Chapter 10, Assessing and Teaching Handwriting and Written Expression. Now, two different things. One was very traumatic for me. I have sad stories about handwriting. I know, you don't want to hear them, but here it is. I'm in second grade. I get a D in handwriting. Yeah, they give a grade for handwriting. And it's in the fall, and my mom, not knowing what to do, takes my baseball glove away. Second grade, you're 8 years old, you're just emerging as a baseball player. So if you get your grade up next quarter, you can have it back. Get the grade after the second quarter, D. Get the grade after third quarter, D. Okay, fourth quarter, spring's coming, summer's coming. Get the grade home at the end of the year in handwriting, penmanship, D. Yeah, it's sad. Never saw the glove again until here about 10 or 12 years ago. I got it in a box of stuff when she was cleaning out her house. There was my glove in the bottom of the box. I have passed this gene along. My eldest son has handwriting like mine. I know. Okay, it's a sad deal. One of the things that you got to know, though, is it can impair writing. What? Yeah, handwriting. If your penmanship is bad and your handwriting is not good, it impairs your ability to formulate written expression. Now, I kind of overcame that in graduate school, and I had to write 100 different papers and things like that. But I know my oldest son still struggles with that. Kind of a really smart kid, but doesn't like to write because of his penmanship. And here's a secret I haven't shared with you either. It's one of the reasons I fell in love with the computer and I love to teach online. So I don't have to use my penmanship, my handwriting. But in this lesson, Chapter 10, we're going to study the two distinct things. Handwriting and written expression. Probably should be separated, but they're not. And if one doesn't go well, the first thing we teach of this is the handwriting to students. The written expression probably is not going to go well either. Chapter 10, Assessing and Teaching Handwriting and Written Expression. All right, let's look at Chapter 10, Assessing and Teaching Handwriting and Written Expression. And again, I want to keep saying to you, it's two separate things. And the first portion of the lesson, of course, is on handwriting. And it'll start out with just describing different handwriting problems. And as true as of other studies, it'll talk about assessing, formal and informal ways to assess. And then it'll go into a thing about how to teach handwriting skills, readiness, manuscript, transition, cursive, even typewriting, keyboarding, a little bit about it. And then some handwriting activities, readiness activity, manuscript, cursive activities. And then some commercial handwriting programs. And then it'll stop and go into written expression. And again, it'll talk about the ways to assess formal and informally, some ways to teach it, the process approach to writing or writing instruction, and then some activities. And again, like last, I will have you get involved in investigating these different activities of the different areas. Fluency and syntax development, vocabulary development, structure development, content development, and then we'll look again together at some commercial written ones and some software programs for it. So, as I say, really two separate things, handwriting and written expression. Chapter 10 starts out like this, and it's going to have some lessons right off here, some things about it. Highly complex, and you know that because of what the coordination and accuracy it takes to make it legible. As I was whining earlier about my poor writing, I have my oldest brother is a lawyer, and his handwriting's impeccable. It was since he's a little kid. Of course, that was the standard I was held to with my baseball glove. So, yeah, I know, but it had a lasting impression. But it integrates this visual, motor, and conceptual abilities, and that's what makes it All right. In classroom instruction usually begins in kindergarten or first grade, and you all remember that. And that's kicked off. And really prior to that, it's all readiness stuff. Everything we do before that in preschool, kindergarten is getting us ready to write. And this is why there's more and more pressure to mandate preschool is in this area, because readiness for this also is readiness for reading. Okay. And then the formation of the letters and stuff are stressed till about third grade. Then after third grade, it's really on that writing form, meaningful self-expression, using grammar and developing quality ideas expressed, those types of things. Requires sustained attention, which is a problem students need direct, concrete instruction to become proficient in written instruction. Now, I want to say to you again, it's so important for kids to be decent handwriters, to be good writers, to be expressive. Here's a discussion, that I'm going to bring up to you also is how important is handwriting now in our era of technology. Okay, just kind of keep this in part of your thoughts through this whole lesson is, where is the future of handwriting, especially cursive handwriting, in the era of technology? Okay. Well, first of all, some handwriting problems. Major objectives is legibility and fluency. Okay, that's not profound. You knew that. Can you read it? And can you do it quickly enough to be an effective tool in communicating? Okay, it says here the ability to write letters accurately and quickly is a predictor of success in written expression. Profound, right? They need to do this. This instruction begins at focusing on holding the writing instrument correctly, forming the letters correctly, maintaining the proper spacing and proportion. And all of us that have either taught this or remember this, this is what it's all about. Spacing and proportion, and even how hard you push on the pencil is a taught thing. Here's some problems with the motor problems, faulty visual perception of letters, poor visual memory, poor instruction, lack of motivation. And this will be a theme, the motivation, throughout this lesson, and especially those of us in special education working with kids that are having some struggles in writing. Motivation, especially by the time they get to upper elementary, they've become somewhat defeated. And this is where my older son is. Already just feels that that's not his thing. Now, I've seen him do some typing and stuff. He's very expressive with that. But handwriting, he's just been criticized and critiqued since day one that his handwriting is so poor. Part of it, he's always in a hurry to get done, especially bigger things. And this is a kid that had preschools coming out of his ears. And this is my thought on that part of it is he was in preschool for 3 years before kindergarten. I mean, they started in the daycare we're in, had preschool when they were 3. Yeah. Okay. Here's a student's show a variety of handwriting problems like this. First is slowness, right? Incorrect directionality of letters. In other words, they flip them. All right, too much or too little slant. Spacing difficulties. Messiness. Inability to stay in a horizontal line in legible letters. Too much or too little pencil pressure. And mirror writing. Okay. And so I'd say mine was just messy, just hard to read. Okay. And it goes on to talk about some of the most difficult letters to identify. These letters here account for 48% of the omissions. Here's another 5 letters, 54% of the miscues. Here, these authors, Morrow Newman, examined the cursive writing of 2,300 people and found that 50% of the illegible involved the letters A, E, R, and T. And I guess that would be right. Okay, and it talked about the most common thing is they fail to close them. And students have to practice that. And like I said, my son, that he detested that, having to practice making letters for the heck of it. And it shows some errors. Then assessment of handwriting skills, 8 to 9-year-olds, the teacher should remember that occasional reversals, omissions, and poor spacing are normal. Now get much beyond 8 or 9, not. But before that it is. If it's beyond that, then there's some issues. Okay, so here's some formal things. Because only a few norm reference measures of handwriting are available. Because it's very hard to standardize because evaluating it is very subjective. So there's not a lot of formal stuff out there to formally assess handwriting. So there's rating scales and inventories are frequently used to assess it. And it's kind of like other things like behavior. Subjective, so it's done with rating scales. Here, 10.1 presents published handwriting assessment devices. That includes 2 standardized measures. Published legibility examples of student handwriting, such as the evaluation guides produced by Zanner Blauser, has been around forever. They're kind of the grandparents of writing and writing assessments. So just remember that name, and you want to talk intelligently about writing. Talk about Zanner Blauser. And they have provided subjective evaluation of handwriting competence. They're not specific. These guidelines do not highlight specific errors in handwriting and such. Okay. And here's crash time. I'm back. It's the 5th crash today. Again, here's some handwriting assessment devices. One I'm more familiar with, test of handwriting skills, because it does both uppercase and lowercase, and either manuscript writing or for students 6 through 8 or cursive writing above that. So let's jump right in then to informal. That's about all we have in formal. Teacher can obtain diagnostic. Remember, diagnostic meaning to diagnose. Formally by visually examining the student's handwriting. Writing samples can be used to determine problems. So what thing about writing, it'll always be about samples. Writing samples. Mansuter and McClung obtaining 3 samples, the student's usual, best, and fastest handwriting. Now certainly you've had this in your writing class also, but that's generally the how you start this, is those 3 ones. And then it describes usual as just normal, then best, and then fast. Then a 3-minute timing given is to see how many times a student can write a given sentence. And that's, again, you're not working on expression, just on writing. Sometimes students can write legibly only when specific asked to do so, and that's what Alex, my oldest one, was. If you asked him specifically, he could do better, but generally he was in a hurry. So every year at conferences, here's what we'd hear from the teacher. If he would just slow down. And I come to a conclusion, kind of did a applied behavioral analysis of the behavior. I knew you'd like that. And what I've determined is that he was overwhelmed. Anything that was a very big assignment, he wanted to get it done. And of course, like in any classroom, there was some rewarding things for getting done, before the class. You got to read or be on the computer. So he quickly learned early on to be in a hurry. All right. So while observing the student handwriting, you ask these questions about gripping the pencil. Where's the paper positioned? Are they sitting correctly? That's a big one. It doesn't seem, kids don't seem to think that's important, but it is. Which hand? I got a lefty. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I tried everything to make him a righty, but he's a lefty. Are they frustrated? Do they have a negative attitude? They generally don't early on, but I guarantee by upper elementary, and their writing has suffered. It affects their attitude. And then some other things in informal assessment, by analyzing their writing samples, error patterns, because you want to start to know what you have to work on, just like we did back with math. Just like we did with reading and vocabulary and speech. You start to look at what specifically to teach. So first is letter formation. And I'm going to ask you to bring a little of that in. Let me go ahead and pop up the PowerPoint here and get you started on this. This is out of the textbook, somebody writing. It looks to be pretty good posture. I'm not quite sure in his left hand why. It looks like he has a highlighter or something. Not sure why. And then this I just grabbed is just the formation of letters.
And it talked about handwriting problems, which is that legibility or fluency. And again, legibility if somebody can't read it, and fluency if it takes them forever to do it. And here's the things that can contribute to it: poor motor problems, poor visual memory, poor instruction. And as I said to you, the lack of motivation will be an issue. Here's these problems. Here's those formal ones. And here's what I'm going to ask you to do with these. In your notes, if you would, and I'm sure you would love to do this, in your notes, just put a little information on each of these of what they're to assess. Just a couple lines, what they're to assess, what their strengths is, and to help you determine when you'd use one over the other. And here's these things we just talked about. They sit correctly, they hold the pencil right, light slant, right pressure, those things. And here's where I wanted to head. I want you to make a note about each of these also out of the textbook about the formations. Right here, the letter formation. Just a reminder to yourself, just one line or two about each of those different things. The letter formation, letter size, proportional alignment, spacing, and it gives you a description of each of these here in the textbook. The slant, I know I struggled with slant, how to slant it. And then it had all kinds of things to try and help. Rate, and here, this here, and I gave you this. I clipped this and gave you this on a different speed, so you have what would be normal speeds. The letters per minute, not words, letters that they should be able to do in handwriting. Okay. The student's time for 1 minute in daily performance, and each probe sheet is charted to monitor the progress. So again, you're familiar with this constant 1 minute timings. And also, if assessing handwriting difficulties, the teacher can encourage them to use self-evaluation. And here's the thing with self-evaluation: kids, especially kids are struggling, they get really tired of erasing, and so you'll find some resistance to self-evaluation. This is profound for me. I think self-evaluation is great for kids that are being successful, but a lot of these kids that are going to have failures, are not going to succeed, are going to be less enthused about self-evaluating anything. And so just know that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying it may not be your end all here. And then how do you teach this handwriting skill? These repetitious drills and mass practice without supervision should be avoided, and should receive immediate feedback on how they're doing. In other words, don't let them practice errors. And I gave you this too for you to bring into your wiki. This diagnostic chart. First of all, what the problem is, the cause, and the remediation. And I really had to clip this into two because it was so big. So it'll be two separate ones you bring in. And there's two, actually it's three, because this was the third one, I think. But just again, I want you to have some stuff to go to when you're student teaching and beyond, and even teaching, of what to do, how to assess, work with writing. And here's the end of it. So that was quite a big one. And the model should provide both good and poor work, so the student eventually can make comparisons, determine necessary changes. And this is a word that I don't think we talk enough about in the area of special ed, and that is model. Models, constantly modeling what's good, because otherwise they don't know that this is what happened to my son. Is he always thought what he had was good enough. From what his world, why does it have to be any better than that? Brief lessons, and again, especially kids that are struggling, brief is always better. And what we're not used to is we're used to inundating kids more with this. Can you remember that for me? Not only in writing, but a lot of things that make them brief. Again, just because I watched my Alex struggle with things that were long, if he perceived them to be too long. So brief lessons are more effective than a single lengthy period, weekly or monthly lesson. Quick, briefer lessons. Teachers should demonstrate the correct way to form letters and should supervise student handwriting efforts carefully. Here's another challenge I'll throw down to you is, what if they don't have the readiness skills? What if you start working with a child in 2nd or 3rd grade that's really struggling with handwriting? Do you back up and do readiness skills? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that you incorporate them, that you use direct instruction and explicitly teach handwriting, but you continue some readiness things that we do, coloring, cutting, gluing, creating, to try and strengthen those things. Observing moving models, like watching their teacher write, is more effective than copying things that are already written. They should circulate around the room, see what's going on. Moreover, the teacher should avoid the following handwriting instructional errors. Here they are: unsupervised handwriting practice while skills are being formed. Lack of immediate feedback to correct errors. Yes or no, that's correct, that's not correct. Then lack of emphasis on student analysis of errors. In other words, looking for patterns of it specifically. Because if it's just very specific things, then you can kind of really directly work on that. They don't have to keep copying everything. Failure to provide close range models to correct their formation. Repeated drill of both correct and incorrect letter production. See what I'm saying? If you continue to make them drill on things that they know how to do, that too can be kind of self-defeating. Then Graham said, most common recommendation is to students frequently write connected text, meaning something meaningful. Other than just words to practice, let them practice on things that are meaningful, that are connected to the world, either curriculum or their life, something like that. I tried to clip this also, so you'd have it, just a little reminder. Self-completion of time, exercise, and use of reinforced or increased motivation. Here's the word again, motivation. Teachers should always help them develop positive attitude. Good luck. I mean, that will be a challenge with struggling learners in all areas. And a lot of it they'll take from you. How enthused you are, how motivated, how positive you are. Really, I don't think we emphasize this enough, but especially in special ed, really watch your attitude, really watch your enthusiasm. Be an enthusiastic teacher. These kids need that. Students need to diagnose and correct handwriting problems because handwriting difficulties may impede efficient work production and influence teacher evaluations and grading. Sorry, folks, but this is a fact. That these handwriting difficulties will impede their work efficiency and their influence evaluations and grading in the future. Most of you were good writers, but I know what this to be true, that if they're struggling reading it, they're just naturally going to grade less. And as a consequence, it's never a true reflection of what the student knows. Okay, there. So writing, manuscript writing, transitional writing, these things. Well, that was out of here, yes. Scope and sequence chart of handwriting is in the appendix. The development of handwriting skills and teaching strategies in the next area start areas of readiness skills. Okay, so here starts with readiness skills, then manuscript writing, transitional writing, cursive, typewriting, keyboarding are also considered alternatives. But for the most part, there's not enough research on the effectiveness of that for younger kids. But I assure you, my oldest one will flourish when he gets to a point that he can use the computer and start to write that way. Let me pop back to our notes here a second. But again, you're going to bring some information about these in. And then here's this thing, some of the errors to avoid. Handwriting readiness things. So readiness includes interest in writing, developing their ability to hold writing instruments, and refining their fine motor control. So again, as you see, it's quite complex. It has to do with eye-hand coordination, visual perceptions, a number of things. So Muscular coordination developed in a child through manipulative experiences like cutting with scissors, finger painting, tracing, coloring, all readiness things. So I'm saying if you're working with elementary kids that seem to lack these, that you can start to incorporate those, but you're still going to need to, you don't want to abandon your readiness, your writing instruction for just readiness stuff. Chalkboard activities provide practice and give the student the opportunity to use muscle development shoulders. Okay, so here, let me jump back here of what does it look like. Writing requires this hand-eye. Students should be able to do these following things, and this is what you might have to work on. Perform hand movements such up, down, left, right, forward, backward. And it's fine motor stuff. And so if they're fine, who generally lacks fine motor skills? And which gender? I know, boys. I feel like you're laughing at it right now, but they get blamed a lot of this. They're gross motors. They can throw the football and hit the baseball, but they don't have the fine motor skills. Where'd the fine motor skills come from that the little girls possess? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, from playing with dolls and that type of play when they're little. And they develop these fine motor skills of dressing and undressing dolls and doing paper dolls and doing that kind of play versus the boys with the gross motor. So in a school, as a consequence, in this area, boys are behind. And so sometimes they need this development more. Tracing is a big one. Connecting the dots helps with readiness. Horizontal line, left to right. Vertical line, top to bottom. Backward circle. Backward circle. Okay, see, I feel like you're looking at my handwriting and critiquing me, and don't that's hurting my feelings a little bit here. Draw slanted lines vertically. Copy simple designs and shape. Name letters, discern likeness, differences in letters and forms. See, I made a pretty good line there, didn't I? Not too crooked. I'm going to make a nice straight one there. See? It's not too bad, is it? During handwriting instruction, these things should be sitting in a comfortable chair. Of course, that's always kind of a thing in school, is what is a comfortable chair. Lower back touching the back of the seat and feet on the floor. And in my opinion, disagree if you like, but that's a very unnatural way for young people to sit. So that will be your challenge. And the desk or table should be the height that allows the student to place forearms on a writing surface. So you got to be aware of the desk heights, because you may have small kids and big desks, or big kids and small desks, and you should have some control over that. Then that non-writing hand holds that paper. Left-handers, talks about what to do with left-handers here. Pencil should be held highly in the triangle form of the thumb. First two fingers, and the hand should rest slightly on the outer edge. And this is all good stuff that you've probably got other places. The pencil should be held about an inch above its point with the right-handers, and the pencil should point toward the right shoulder. Left-hander should hold the pencil about 1 1/4 inches from its writing point, a little bit higher. And commercial pencil grips are available, and there's that name again of who provides those. And a lot of times in your resource room, hopefully you'll have some of those grips. Just easier to on. Or you can use tape if you need to. And you'll know that they're hanging on too tight if their hand gets tired during a period of time. Now let's just look at this manuscript writing. Okay, manuscript known as print, like this. Uh-oh, I forgot to close that. There. Would that be pretty good? See, I'm self-conscious about it. Because it should be taught in kindergarten, and I'm really embarrassed to tell you this to you, but I turned 6 in 1966, and I didn't go to kindergarten. It wasn't mandatory, and your mom had to take you or pick you up as all half day, and so I never got to go to kindergarten. think that could explain why I struggle with handwriting? Well, I'd like to explain it that way, but again, the oldest brother, who has impeccable handwriting, never went to kindergarten either, so it kind of shoots that theory all to pieces. It's based entirely on basic shapes of circles and straight lines, and can usually focus on teaching children to recognize the form and form upper and lower case. And that's a big part of it, is this constant thing of upper and lower. And, you know, that's, you know this about kindergarten. And naming them. Start to work on spacing. Spacing in first grade. So Graham and Harris in 05 recommend that young students with handwriting problems should be provided with supplemental instruction. And here's what that looked like, the 4-step thing. Again, this is young. This alphabet warm-up, alphabet practice, alphabet rockets, and alphabet fun. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this a number of places, but I'm going to ask you to make sure you bring this in, not only here, but bring this into your wiki someplace and identify it so you have this also. This students with handwriting problems, that 4-step approach. Then it goes to this transitional writing from manuscript to cursive. Can you remember when you did that? You made this change? What did you find about it? I didn't like it. I was struggling. Occurs during the 2nd grade, and I think it was actually 3rd when I was instructed, or 3rd. And after the students mastered the manuscript, and that's quite a term too. The first has to be mastered. Because of individual learners and motor skills, levels of interest in cursive writing, some of the students are cursive writing 1st or 2nd, yes, while other students are given additional time. Of course, who wants to be the first in 1st and 2nd grade? The girls. Because their readiness skills. So we come back here to these readiness skills. What we talked about, holding instruments, refining their motor skills, cutting, talk about that. Here is those things you can do that was in the notes. Teacher should determine which hand the student uses most often in natural situations, such as eating or throwing a ball. And if a youngster who indicates a strong preference for the left hand should be allowed to do so in writing. Now, as I said before, I have one, and I'm telling you, when he was little and would feed himself with his left hand and throw with his left hand, I tried everything to make him a right-hander. I corrected him so many times that finally I just gave up. And then we went to school, of course. He started with his left hand. I said to the teacher, I don't think he's left-handed, because he still has some tendencies right for right-handedness. What are they? Well, he bats right-handed. He throws left-handed, shoots the basketball left-handed, but he bats right-handed. I tried to make a left-handed batter out of him, couldn't hit the ball. Can drive the thing forever right-handed, but can't hit it left-handed. And has a whole bunch of other weird things like that. And that's why I never thought he was a left-hander, but he writes left-handed. Now he's 10 and writes left-handed. Students should be doing this, studying how there should be non-writing hands, all the things we just talked about. Paper should be straight, hooking if they're left-handed, if they want to do it that way. And then that's into this manuscript writing. It talks about the errors. It's taught in kindergarten, 1st grade. Here's that thing. How about this multi-sensory approach, often used in teaching letter forms? The student sees, hears, traces, and letter model. And here's the steps. Shows the letter, and I think this is good. Says the letter, name of the letter and stroke directions. Traces the model with a finger. Student traces the letter with a pencil. Student copies the letter on paper. Okay. And here's the fading model. Can be used to teach handwriting. The letter model is presented, and I saw my kids brought these papers home. where it was just like this, started out darker, and it faded, and they were to keep making those. As soon as possible, activities should be provided in which words are used and writing says something. That is kind of a natural motivator, a natural occurrence. That they're not just practicing writing, they're communicating something. That will help with motivation. Here, this too goes to some of the common errors. Incorrect size, most common type of error in these things. Most frequent reverse letters, incorrect relationships or parts, partial omissions. I remember I had trouble with the M in the end. The M had 3 loops in cursive. Additions often occur in the letters of here, and most frequently mishapped letter forms are J, G, E, and capital J. And here's the letters that are often reversed, such as B, D, P, Q, S, N. Teachers should emphasize the correct beginning point. I know my older one, when he was learning, struggled with B and D, flipping those around. And we came up with some special ed strategies to do that, and that's where you hold your fingers up. So whenever he would struggle, we would say, put your fingers up like this. Bed, it's a bed. 1B, 1D. And that's the test. And then I start to see him use that. He'd hold them up whenever he couldn't decide which way the B or D should be. Bed. And that was a special ed strategy that seemed to help him. And then he had less problems with flipping those around. So poor formation and alignment is another one. Then they recommend students writing problems should be provided supplemental instruction. And to me, how profound is that? Yeah, you and I knew that. And here's those that I'm asking you to bring in. This alphabet warm-up, alphabet practice, alphabet rock. It's just things to kind of start that off. Then you move to this transitional writing as you get ready for cursive. Transitional from manuscript to cursive typically occurs during that 2nd or 3rd grade. Maybe 3rd or 4th. Some controversy exists concerning whether to begin with manuscript or cursive writing. Okay. You don't hear a lot about it, but I said more discussion now about if we even need to teach cursive anymore because of the onset of the computer. And that's a whole nother discussion, but what is the future of technology in our schools, especially in elementary? There's a large number of people said, oh, no, never go away, but I'm not so sure that we won't see more of that. These authors here who favor manuscript writing claim that it requires less complex movements and reduces reading problems because most printed pages are in manuscript. So saying forget cursive, manuscript. Now here's the advocates of cursive writing first say, believe that it results in fewer reversals because of that rhythmic flow and that it helps the student perceive whole words. Okay, hard to argue with either of those. Here, this up here was, back in 1947, and in 73, and these folks down here have had kind of a long look at it also. So when you see these kind of dates in this printed, like 1966, 1983, 1960, see the dates in your textbook? 1947, that tells you it's been a long debate. And that's why you pay a little bit of attention to these dates all throughout your textbook. Is how long ago was this done? Was this study? Gives you a little idea of some of the background in it. Then Graham and Wittentraub come along and say that there's a lack of evidence favoring one over another, that they both made compelling points. So, however, for students with learning disability, Graham recommends that handwriting instruction should start with traditional manuscript letters for 3 reasons. Most children come to kindergarten or 1st grade, they already know how to write some manuscript letters. Make sense? Absolutely. Number two, manuscript may be easier to learn than cursive writing. And three, when manuscript has been mastered, it can be written as fast and as possibly even more legibly than cursive. And that's what I did. And you know, it's kind of funny too. When I got to college, here's what happened to me. And I got to college about 25 years ago. And first semester I'm there, I'm taking freshman comp, a favorite of a lot of us. And of course, in my school wasn't taught by a professor; it was taught by a grad student. And after the first paper, the grad student turned it back and said, "I can't read this. Maybe you should try printing, manuscript writing." And so I started to write everything manuscript printed all through college, and that got a little better, but I really completely let go of cursive writing at that time. Yeah. Okay. So Mann and his group suggest the method of transitional writing. The word is printed in manuscript. Letters are connected with a dotted line. The student traces over the manuscript letter and connecting dotted lines into cursive, like this down here. Okay. Just to kind of get you started in this transitional thing. Alright. A Danielian handwriting program is designated to facilitate the transition. So here's a commercial one. And that's another big name in writing is Danielian. And then finally, cursive begins in the second or third grade, depending upon the development of that individual, girls over boys. Many of the same techniques used to teach manuscript, such as multi-sensory approach, fading model, can also be used to cursive instruction. Okay. And there's that. And then here's an idea of how to approach it. Family, E-family first, family with a handle is next letter, and it gives you some sequence of how to do it. Tompkins notes that the most troublesome cursive letter in the lowercase is R. The other lowercase letters that students frequently have form incorrectly are K, P, and Z. Newland in 1932. That's right, it's in your textbook. They're quoting some research from 1932. Notes that 4 specific letters, A, E, and R, and T, contribute to a large number of errors in cursive writing. Now, to me, that fascinates me, that somebody did that study and published it in 1932, and these authors, Mercer and Mercer, who really are legendary up here in special ed textbooks, are citing research from 1932. Remember, you heard it here first, folks. And then type reading and keyboarding, and again, they're not allowed. See, there's just very little written about it. Maybe available alternative for students if severe fine motors or who write very slowly. Simple motor movements, typing include faster speed, highest degree of legibility. That's what you get from this, is that legibility. And here's a word too that I'm going to suggest to you, and you've heard me talk about this before: motivation. This is what I based that entire SPED 465 class on, is the motivation of using the computer. And if you're going to work in the area of special ed, this will be job one nearly every day, will be motivation. And so I'm telling you here's another author that agrees with me: motivation. Also, the ability of type facilities use the computers and word processing programs. They're more available. They're more available than they ever were before. Also, the ability to type facilitates the use of computers. Word processing and keyboarding is becoming a basic literacy skill because word processing is standard method of writing. Would you agree? However, it should be noted that for most youngsters, keyboarding is actually slower than handwriting. Why? Because that hunt and peck method. The development of keyboarding skills occurs about 2 years later. Now, what you don't see any research on is somebody teaching it before that. The reason it occurs 2 years later is because that was the scope and sequence that was always taught. Nobody talked about teaching keyboarding before that. You want to be a researcher, do some research on teaching kids keyboarding like in 1st or 2nd grade. I can't see why it wouldn't go faster, why they wouldn't pick it up quicker. You may need a smaller keyboard, just facilitate that. But I can only imagine that they would pick that up. Of course, the other thing that's not mentioned here also is it's now the voice to text ability that all computers come with. That may be really advantage to kids with learning problems. Primary grades become familiar with the keyboard, then learn basic hand positioning and proper posture. Formal instruction usually begins in the 3rd or 4th grade of this. Select computer programs available for teaching touch type or keyboarding, like jumpstart typing, sticky bear typing, are ones that are pause. Another one. It's programs to teach keyboarding. Keyboard that weighs less than 2 pounds. Okay, so here's the information on that. Let me go back to see what else we have here. Is transitional writing, cursive writing, typing and keyboarding. Different readiness. These were all in the text. We went over these in the textbook. This is a good one that I've seen student teachers use effectively. Is this, doing it in the salt or cornmeal or sand shapes, letters, paper covering paper, onion skin things. Here about making stencils from plastic or styrofoam cardboard. I'm going to have you guys evaluate these a little bit. Manuscript script writing activities. Here's the cursive writing activities. Then the commercial handwriting programs. Take back that. Again, these handwriting activities I'm going to bring in. Again, here's the manuscript writing readiness activities. It's important that you have a resource of those to go to when you're working with kids. Here's that Danielian program described. Written expression. Here's that Xander Blouser that I said is big in the handwriting. Okay. So that's handwriting. And that's quite long. You may want to go take a break now and work on a few things and come back as I discuss written expression. Written expression, as I said before, will really struggle if the student is not, the handwriting didn't keep up, because they make a close connection between the two. Okay. Whereas handwriting is primarily a visual motor task, includes copying, tracing, and writing and dictation, written expression requires complex thought process. And again, kids, especially kids with learning disabilities, that transition will be a struggle, because they will see writing written expression, language arts, English, whatever we call it in our classes, as an extension of handwriting. And so please understand that when you get the resistance to handwriting, or to this writing from handwriting. Goes on from there. Hochman in 05 says students with learning disabilities may not only have difficulties with spelling, word retrieval, and syntax, but also have a limited vocabulary, weak organizational skills, and the ability to distinguish essential from non-essential things, information. Okay, and some of the activities that are in the back of this part give you some ideas of how to help them with vocabulary and stuff, where you give them words to use. You include words that they can use in their writing, because that fluency is one of their struggles. Written expression is the most complex language art skill. It's based on listening, talking, handwriting, and spelling. Thus, it's generally not stressed in instructional programs for learners with mild disabilities. Okay. Comparison of student written products of students with learning disabilities and their normally achieving peers in 4th, 8th, and 11th grades. Halk and Billingsley found that students with learning disabilities write fewer words and sentences, write more words per sentence, in other words, run on, produce fewer words with 7 letters or more, and fewer sentence fragments that have a higher percentage of capitalization and spelling errors. Again, I'm saying to you folks, that is not profound. You could have written that statement without any research. Fewer words and sentences, more words per sentence, meaning run-ons, fewer words with 7 letters or more, fewer sentence fragments, and have a higher percentage of capitalization and spelling errors. Okay, so that's what that looks like. Thus, the writing difficulties of students with learning disabilities range from mechanical aspects of writing, like spelling, grammar, punctuation, and capitalization, to content aspects of writing, like organization and generalization, idea generation, organization, and coherence. Can be improved by increasing the time allocated for instruction. Having said that, from Mercer and Mercer here, I'm saying sometimes those longer things become their undoing. Here is a veganism. I would make it shorter, choppier parts that they can complete sooner, and hook those parts together into bigger projects. But more time for instruction. If you're going to do more time for instruction, instruct and give them smaller things to work on. That's in handwriting. So here's written expression. This is where you're reading this. I find this interesting because they make this case that it's as prevalent as reading disabilities, and I've never seen research that said that reading has always been the most prevalent disability in learning disabilities. So I don't know where Mercer and Mercer is getting this. See, I don't know where this comes from. This study by these people, Mays and Calhoun in 07, found it's most common. So what are they based on? If we simply look at coding on IEPs, this is not true. There has to be, but this is what frustrates me sometimes about research, is then this research is not explained how they came to the conclusion. But beyond a doubt, when you look at how IEPs are coded, this is not as common as reading. It's not the most common, so I don't know what that means. Okay, this is where you're reading. That's what I was just reading to you out of the out of the textbook. An integrated process means as part of, to teach as an integrated process as part of your other instruction and your other subjects. Make it an inclusive thing, that you're teaching science, social studies, even math, that you're including writing instruction in it in elementary and secondary for as far as that goes. Okay, here's the formal written expression assessments. And again, what I'm going to ask you to do is, in your notes, bring each one of these and put one or two line of what about those that would make you choose those as your form of written achievement, of written expression. Let me go back to the textbook and show you where that is. Like this metropolitan achievement, content development, organizational strategies, word choice, usage, word mechanics. That's what that's for. Peabody, pre-writing skills, early. Stanford is assess ideas and development. The Terra Nova assesses language skills, including sentence structure. So again, put that in your notes there. And this is good. Then it goes into this informal expression assessments. Informal. Teachers begins informal assessment of written expression by obtaining representative writing samples from the student and analyzing them to determine their weakness. Several ways to do this: a curriculum base or a portfolio base. And you're looking for these five major components of writing, and you've heard these before: fluency, syntax, vocabulary, structure, and content. So you take samples and you analyze and determine what needs to be taught. That focus on the content of written this. And I think this has it back here. These informal. Now again, I'm going to ask you to bring each one of these in and give some insight on all these. Now these first 5 are what writing is made up of, and then these are some others for assessment. But in our textbook, it tells us how to assess these. But this is what writing is about: fluency, syntax, vocabulary, structure, and content. Okay, and then all these you'll bring information in. And again, please put them in red so I can easily discern them. Okay, let me take you back to the textbook so we can look at them together quickly. This fluency is the quantity of verbal output. Number of words written. Sorry, but that's the essence of it, is the number of words written. Okay. For example, a student who is able to write more words is likely to be more fluent in generating ideas. And unfortunately, folks, that's the way it is. If they can write more, they get more ideas. If they're slow writers, they tend to generate less. You will identify those kids. If you're an early elementary teacher, you will identify these kids. Unfortunately, you're the 9th grade teacher, the same things persist. Kids that are slow in producing and generating will generate less ideas. It's a fact. Okay? The average sentence length in a composition is determined by counting the number of words and the number of sentences in the composition and dividing that number of words by the number of sentences. In general, you know this, longer sentences indicate a more mature writing style. Okay, here's Cartwright in 1968 found that the average sentence length of an 8-year-old is 8 words. That the length increase 1 word per year through age 13. So an 8-year-old should be able 8-word sentences, and a 13-year-old 13-word sentences. Okay, anything deviates from that is really kind of a problem if it's less. Fluency is how much they produce. Then syntax is the construction of sentences and the way words are put together to form phrases, clauses, and sentences. What are the errors in that? Like word omissions, distorted word order, incorrect verb pronoun usage, incorrect word endings. Lack of punctuation is a big one. And again, I can remember struggling, and still do some with my kids. That simple thing about just putting a capital at the beginning and a period at the end, because I kind of expected that already when they were, just emerging as writers, and yet it really, especially my older one, it took a long time for him to want to do that. Okay, that's what syntax is about. Errors of older writers with learning disabilities is attributed to errors which the student generates a phrase instead of a sentence. And here's what I think it is. I think it's that continual trying to separate talking from writing. That we want to write, immature writers want to write like they talk. And often we get away with talking in incomplete sentences, and it seems to be acceptable, but not in writing. That's why you can get long, rambling sentences also. One method of assessing syntactic maturity is number of sentences that fall into several categories: incomplete, simple, compound, and complex. Percentage of use of the 4 sentence types in a writing sample can be computed to provide comparisons for a record. And each of these, as you do these, and this here, what is this? Diagnostic reference and criterion reference tests. And it lists a number of them here. Okay, and here's a criterion reference. This is for Gant's inventory. K to 9th grade. Here it gives you the age range of them. Here's another common measure of syntax is this T-unit length. Words per terminable unit. A T-unit is the shortest grammatically correct segment that a passage can be divided into without creating fragments. Thus, a sentence consisting of one T-unit may have subordinate clauses and stuff, but T-unit is another evaluation thing that you may use to evaluate syntax. Vocabulary refers to that originality or maturity of a student's choice of words and the variety of words used in written tasks. Okay, you know that. Then here's a type token ratio. The TTR is a measure of vocabulary that is the ratio of different words used to the total number of words used. So how do you do that? Example, the sentence, the 2 boys went fishing in Noonan's Lake early yesterday morning, has a TTR of 1. 11 total words are used, and all 11 words are different. That's how you can evaluate vocabulary. Okay, low TTR may indicate that the adequate vocabulary for the written expression task. If it's high, then it's less mature writing. Okay. Vocabulary variety can also be addressed by using the index of diversification. This refers to the average number of words between each occurrence of the most frequently used word. One assessment is to divide the total number of words in the sample by the number of times the word is used, or by the number of times the word used most often appears. Again, what you're measuring in vocabulary is maturity of writing. Finally, vocabulary can be assessed by measuring the number of unusual words. This assessment sample of students' written expression should be compared to the list of words frequently used by other students. For example, dolch. Here's another one. Look at this, 55 and 60 word list. Number of words the student uses that do not appear on the list indicates the extent of the student's vocabulary. So that's all about maturity of word. You know, it goes back to people judge you by the words you use. This is one of the maturity things. This goes back to reading readiness. This goes back to why we read to kids when they're little. It gives them vocabulary. The more vocabulary you have, the more you can read. The more you read, the more you can write. You know, then you'll use different words. Okay. Next is structure, mechanical aspects of writing, such as punctuation, capitulations, rules of grammar. Grammatical correctness ratio, that's GCR, can be used to assess this, and it gives you a description how to do that. You can have an error analysis chart, or teacher made test items can be also used. But in all these things, whatever you use to evaluate this, then you'll want to have some data. You'll collect data on any of these or all of these that you use for somebody that's learning to write, or you're trying to improve their writing. And so you can go back and reanalyze it. And that's the beauty of these informal assessments, is you can do an ongoing assessment so you can communicate, just like we talked in reading and spelling. Here's the error analysis chart, how you can chart it. Okay. Content. The fifth component of written expression can be divided into accuracy, ideas, and organization. Thus, aspects of content should be considered in assessment include the generation of coherent parts of this content, what's in there. Right? Then these two also have some things with assessment, a profile of components, penmanship, spelling, grammar. Grammar is encapsulation, punctuation, and syntax. Ideation, students' type of writing, substance and productivity, comprehensive ability. Okay. Profile of components. Then we come over here, curriculum-based. Your writing skills are assessed through repeated 3-minute writing samples using stimulus story starters on a topical sentence having to do with what's being studied. So it takes about 30 story starters a year for this measurement. And then you analyze it from there. And here's how you score that curriculum-based stories thing. A holistic scoring rates the reviewer's composition within the same distribution to determine the overall impressions and assign a value to that rating scale. Or an analytical scoring, scored by specific qualities of traits such as organization, ideas. And back here we gave you some of those. Then a primary trait raters focus on the degree of consistency in that rating. Okay, so that is your curriculum-based. This here talks about it. Alright, I give you this too, the procedure for administering and scoring written expressions measuring, determining long-term goals and graphing data. These 9 steps. I clipped that for you. Alright. You go back here. Oh, the different types of writing. That's what's coming up here. Oh, here. Oh, we're still here. Portfolio assessments, notes, diagrams, drafts, those types of things. You know, it's like any portfolio. It's a collection of what they're doing. And then this one here is what you will do and you know about as a good, research-based special ed teacher is these observation interviews. Observe the student's actions during various stages of the writing process. For example, the teacher can note whether the student spends time thinking and making notes. Also, interviews conducted before and after. And again, if you work with frustrated writers, folks, this is going to be a little skewed. And your challenge will be that motivation thing. Okay. In addition to written language observation scale, it's going to be used norm reference 25 thing to rate their writing. So you can bring that in. Alright, so now we go to this about teaching it specifically, and what are the purposes. Written expression primarily is concerned with corrective writing, but also includes functional writing. Creative writing, functional writing, expository writing. And there's 3 types of this expository writing. Alright. And processing approach to writing. Let me take you back and give you this others. Here's the creative, personal expression. And you know about that from your training and from your formal education. And functional is to convey something. Again, kids with learning disabilities, it's critical, I think, that you teach them these different things so that they see somewhat of the use of learning to write. Otherwise, like I said, what I see is they view it as an extension or a continual punishment for their poor handwriting. That written expression is a continual punishment of that. And the 3 types of expositories are persuasive, or descriptive, or compare and contrast. And you've all, when you were learning to write, all had to follow these along. First, then the skills and context of that meaning. Students work through 5 writing stages, and I clip this, and I want you to bring that in also, these writing, and you know about these. So here's ISO 07 discusses 4 characteristics of the process approach in which the teacher introduces this. It should be modeled, collaborative, prompted, and become self-initiated and self-monitored. And again, that depends on the learner, the type of learner that you're working with. Okay. And it talks the process approach. Interplay selects a writing topic and rehearse the brainstorm before writing. And one thing I found too is that kids with learning difficulties were not excited about this process because they didn't do like pre-writing and then drafting and revising and then editing and publishing. You mean I got to rewrite this thing 5 times? No! And that was the beauty of the computer. And I had my 8th graders write on the computer that this redoing was so much easier and I had so much less resistance. Okay. So you think about that. The process approach, student independently selects topic and then drafts and goes through it that way. Here's what he discussed. The process should be modeled. And again, in your notes, I want you to bring some information about these different these 4 things here. It should be modeled. Okay, here's those stages, and I clipped that. But collaborative, prompted, should become self-initiated, self-monitored. Talks about these strategies here, but you self-initiated will be up to you and how you motivate and make it real to them. Okay, Graham and Harris in '94, 3 advantages of process approach to writing. Process approach student is writing is frequent and meaningful. Environments and conditions that created are fostered, self-regulating. And 3, integrative nature of learning this. The process approach. Alright. And again, I'll take you back to the notes. It goes through this a little clearer. Talks about these things. Alright. Here's the 10 instructional recommendations. These are straight out of the textbook. And hopefully, the reason for this is that students will connect with something that they enjoy, can write about. A social climate conducive to writing and development. Integrating writing with other subject academics. Again, just don't make it a punishment. That wasn't a very good writing there, was it? Trying to punishment. There. Okay. Aid students in developing the process of central and effective writing. Automatize skills for getting language onto paper. Yeah. Help students develop explicit knowledge about the characteristics. Helps to develop the skills and abilities to carry out this more sophisticated writing. Help students develop goals for improving their written products. Avoid instructional practices that do not improve their writing. And like I was whining about before, it's time as a factor. So if you want something that moves towards sophisticated, they need time, but you need to break it up into chunks. The assignment into chunks that they can be successful in chunks. Because often writing, especially by middle school and certainly high school, become big papers. And somebody that struggles, and so your assumption will be that they're not a very sophisticated writer, and really it might be written expression. The expressive ideas are okay, it's the writing that's a problem. And here again, preventing these writing difficulties. And to me, this isn't profound, that they've got to have the instruction. Your bigger thing in my world will be this: motivation. And the higher they get into middle school and high school, that will be your number 1 thing for writing, is motivation. Okay, tailor writing instructions to meet the needs. Intervene early to provide coherent instruction and sustained effort. Expect that each child will learn to write. Identify these things. Employ technological tools that can improve. And these things here out of your textbook. And I'm going to ask you again, bring these out of your notes and somehow frame them on your wiki so you have these acronyms. And the textbook does a great job of bringing these acronyms for writing instruction. PENS, please, that's 2. COPS is 3. And this is simple. Capitalization. This is the one I used all the time, the COPS thing. Capitalization, overall appearance, P is punctuation, S is spelling. Where are we at here? 2. COPS is 3. DARE is 4. Develop, add, report, end. Here's another acronym strategy. SPACE, setting elements, problems, actions, consequence, emotions. TOWER, think, organize, write, refine. HOW, to improve appearance, heading, organize, write, written neatly. And make sure you organize these, what each of these are for. Okay, that one's for writing instruction, or I should say this one is for appearance. All right, structured approach, fictional narratives. Right. Okay, so put these on your wiki so you have them. Tower, how. All right, and writing instruction. Let me go back to the textbook and walk you through these. Here's the technological tools in writing for this mapping software. We haven't really talked about that, but mapping software, and there's a lot of online stuff now. Webspiration is one where you can map, but this is how you may help assist them in their pre-writing, is this mapping thing. You know, the mapping where you let them draw, you know, that main idea, and then the ideas off of it. And this is where you can get involved in helping them come up with these ideas for their writing and give them vocab words to use in here that include in their story. May be very beneficial to them. And that will teach them how to come up with those ideas themselves. Also, spell checkers, word prediction programs, grammar, style checkers, speech synthesis facilitate that. Speech to text type things. Elements that are this. Okay. The biggest thing with computer I see is the editing. And again, the writing instruction, the first thing they go into here is this positive attitude, and I say you will be challenged. That will be your thing. So integrate into the entire curriculum. Spontaneous, one of the most effective means of teaching writing skills of students with learning problems is spontaneous written expression. Each student writing sample can be used as a base from which to introduce instruction from it. Just don't make them feel like every time I write something now you're going to critique it and I have to learn how to spell those. It has to be more meaningful and integrated than that. Okay. Program may be the student to express ideas with ease. It could be a whole language experience, or direct instruction, or some more of these programs, instructional programs. And if it's a first, then the student may be the most comfortable writing about personal matters such as family trips, holidays, those things. And that's why I say in motivation, your challenge will be, you want this guy here in your class is helping them come up with things that they're familiar with, that they're experts on, and write about it. Okay. You want to read this. To begin writing, brainstorming can generate ideas. Clustering or mapping information can also help them organize those ideas. Some will feel that don't help them, but others it will. Okay, avoid excessive correction. That's what I say. If I feel like you're just waiting to pounce on me as a bad writer, that will seriously hinder my fluency and how much I produce here. Okay. But please read all this about motivating and working and teaching this. I can't do justice to it here without you reading this whole part on it, how to do this instruction, because it's just going to be critical in your success of working with these kids. Sentence combining is a way to help them with their things, and then it goes into these acronyms. And it organizes them really well here. So I say when you put these on your wiki, make sure you clearly identify what this acronym is to help you as a strategy for. Complete the writing task independently is that one. Okay, that's how you want to. So I say I want you to have this resource of your own on your wiki. It brings all those in. Okay. Self-regulated, this SDRS, self-regulated thing was here in the thing also. Instruction is evidence-based, combines effective strategy and teaching students to be self-regulated learners. Okay. Then stages of development of strategy learning, part of that. Develop it, discuss it, model it, memorize it, practice some guidance, perform it. Okay, and these we'll do together, again, this written expression activities. Chapter 10, Assessing and Teaching Handwriting and Written Expression.